Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Jenaya Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. And we would like to invite you, if you haven't already done so, to please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast if you're enjoying your time here. We are going to continue doing episodes throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs as well as throughout the off season as we patiently await more Washington Capitals hockey come October. It's a long ways away. It feels like a long ways away, but we're going to get through this, and we are going to get through this together. So like I said, we're going to continue doing episodes here all throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs and then throughout the off season as well. Even throughout the off season, there's going to be plenty for us to talk about, as it does promise to be an exciting off season for the Caps in particular. As their lineup goes through a retooling of sorts in anticipation of a strong season upcoming in 2023-2024. So we're going to have the NHL draft lottery coming up first. That is what is first up on the docket, and of course that's where the Caps will have a 6% chance of winning the first overall pick and by extension winning the opportunity to select phenom Connor Bedard. So that's obviously very exciting, the anticipation of that. And then after the draft lottery, of course, it will be the entry draft itself, where, even if the Caps don't win that first overall pick, they are pretty much guaranteed at this point to get an impactful NHL player. As this is widely considered to be one of the best and deepest drafts in NHL history. So, like I said, it will be very exciting as a Caps fan, just going through this whole time and seeing, what they do at the draft this year. And then after that, the offseason will undoubtedly roll along into free agency. So we will see who the Caps might pick up there as well as, what contracts might come about for their own players currently on their roster right now. So we'll see what type of deals restricted free agents like Martin Fehérváry and Alexander Alexeyev get. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion, obviously, that they will be re-signed, as like I said, they are just restricted free agents, so the Caps are, of course, the only team as of right now that can actually sign them, unless, for some wild reason the Caps chose not to, but I obviously don't see that happening. They're two very good young players, and General Manager Brian McClellan, he's already stated as well in public that he sees those two guys being a big part of the Caps' future on the back end, along with obviously another talented young guy in Rasmus Sandin. I definitely bet on them staying put, and we will see, like I said, what type of deals they get, where the numbers on those come in at. And another guy who is not a free agent yet, but who is eligible to sign a contract extension with the Caps beginning on July 1st this year, is Tom Wilson. And obviously, I would definitely bet on that contract getting done at some point as well. Both Tom Wilson himself as well as the team have both already commented publicly that they both want to get a deal done to keep Wilson in Washington for the rest of his NHL career. So when both the player and the organization are jointly saying that publicly, that's usually almost as good as a guarantee that that contract extension will get done at some point. And I'm sure that there's going to be some trades going on this offseason for the Capitals as well, by the way. So there should be plenty happening to keep us plenty busy here at Jenaya Talks Caps. There should be, like I said, lots to talk about even during these next months off of the ice, like I said, throughout the offseason. So there should be lots happening, lots going on, lots to talk about. And for now, of course, obviously, the Stanley Cup playoffs are going on, and so that's what we want to talk about today. The first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs is always the best, if you ask me. There's 4 games on every single day, 2 early games and 2 late games. You can just kind of flip the channel back and forth and enjoy the chaos. And the first round is pretty much always pure chaos, and it is a glorious time to be alive if you're a hockey fan. It is like Christmas in April every single year. So let's break it down for you guys, the series that are going on right now, and let's start with our own Eastern Conference, because that is probably the most interesting conference, the most interesting side of things for Caps fans. First up, you've got to start with the President's Trophy winners, right? They are the number 1 seed. They're bound to be the most heavily favored team, and that is, of course, the Boston Bruins, and they are facing off in the first round right now against the Florida Panthers. Now, let me just say this, and I know that I might sound crazy, But you guys, like, if you have heard me talking, I've been saying for like the last 4 months or so now that if you look at the Boston Bruins underlying stats, you know, the advanced statistics that sometimes these mainstream media outlets, they don't bother to look at. But if you look at those underlying stats for the Boston Bruins this season, I've been saying for months now that this is a team, and like I said, it might sound crazy given their position in the standings, but to me, this is a team that is ripe for an upset in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Ripe for it. Like, yeah, I know they have 135 standings points in the regular season. Yeah, I know they broke all of these regular season records for wins and standings points and all of that, but you look at their underlying stats and their process is not nearly as good as their results have been this season. They are a good team, of course. No one's denying that. But they're not 135 standings points good, not even close. So, like, here's some of their underlying statistics from this season. Their expected goal share percentage. That's always a good stat. Their expected goal share percentage was 53%, which is, of course, good, but it's not first place in the league good. And by contrast, their actual goal share percentage was 63%. So that's a monumental jump of 10 percentage points. That's almost unheard of. So what can explain that massive discrepancy? Well, like, it's pretty easy to figure it out, actually, as the Bruins had, by far, the highest PDO in the entire National Hockey League this season. And if you don't know what PDO is, it's basically a stat that is actually able to quantify puck luck. So the higher your PDO score is, the luckier that you've been. That's essentially what it's saying. So, like, the luckier that you've been in getting goals that probably shouldn't have been goals, and in escaping trouble when you probably shouldn't have been able to escape the trouble, etc. So, like I said, it's basically the puck luck stat. That's what it's known as, measuring how lucky or unlucky you've been. And the Bruins have, by far, been the luckiest team in the league this season, and it's not even particularly close. The Bruins, they had a PDO score of 104 this season, which, if you don't know, like, that is the highest PDO score that any team has recorded since the NHL started tracking the stat. So, like, while the Bruins are a good team, of course, they've also just finished up a season where, like, absolutely everything went right for them. Nothing went wrong. So like I said, you know, PDO score of 104, it went more right for them this season than it's ever gone for any other team. Like I said, since they started tracking that stat, which is a long time. So, and when you look at their other underlying stats too, like their Corsi, for example, which is usually a very good indicator of how good a team really is, and it's also usually a very good predictor of playoff success, that, of course, being how much you possess the puck, which, as we know, the Stanley Cup winner at the end of each season usually has a very good Corsi rating. So the Bruins' Corsi rating this season is very mediocre. It places them 15th in the league out of 32 teams. The Panthers, by contrast, who they're facing off against in this first round, the Panthers' own Corsi rating had them placed 3rd in the league. So that's something to keep an eye on. And the other thing for me that I wonder about with the Bruins is Linus Ullmark. Like, how long can he keep this up for? The Bruins goalie this season has vastly outperformed his own career statistics, so much so that you have to think it isn't sustainable because it simply isn't normal for him. And the Bruins are not as good defensively as everyone seems to want to give them credit for, as, like I said, when you actually dig into the numbers, their expected goals against at 5-on-5 this season was 162. But because of Linus Ullmark's play, their actual goals against at 5-on-5 was only 114. So, like, that is a massive difference, and probably an unsustainable difference between how many goals should have been scored against them based on the scoring chances that they do give up and the amount of goals that they actually gave up because Linus Ullmark stood on his head all season and basically saved their asses over and over and over again. So, like, it's the biggest differential of any team in the league when you look at how many goals they were expected to give up versus how many goals they actually gave up. The only other team in the league that even comes close is the Nashville Predators, with, of course, UC Saros saving their bacon a lot of the time as well. So anyways, it's for all of these reasons and more that I have been saying for months now that the Boston Bruins are primed for a soul-crushing upset after their fans have been planning the Stanley Cup parade since November. I don't know if that upset is going to come in the first round. The Panthers, they have a lot of flaws themselves, but certainly it could come in the first round, as the series right now is tied after the Panthers took game 2 in Boston and stole home ice advantage for themselves away from the Bruins. So, and it wasn't even a close game in game 2. The Panthers scored a touchdown and won 6-3. And I actually thought that the Panthers pretty easily could have been up 2-0 in this series right now, as they did outplay the Bruins pretty heavily at 5-on-5 during game number 1 as well. So you never know. All I know is that it's going to be pretty fucking funny if they don't win the Stanley Cup after they just traded away their entire future to go for it this season. Like, that is going to suck if it doesn't work out. Anyways, the other series that we have got going on in round 1 in the East are the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Carolina Hurricanes versus the New York Islanders, and the New Jersey Devils versus the New York Rangers. So Tampa and Toronto, right? It's a rematch from last season's playoffs as well. And this time around, the Lightning, they blew up the Leafs in game number 1. Blew them up. And I was really, really impressed with how the Lightning came out in that game in Toronto. I was a little bit worried about the Lightning after having seen how they were playing to wind down the regular season, really for the last month or so. Really, if I'm being honest, for most of this regular season, actually, the Lightning didn't look particularly good. So I was a little bit worried about them, but they certainly flipped the playoff switch and turned it on for game 1. Scoring a touchdown plus the extra point conversion. And it was ex-Caps goaltender Ilya Samsonov in net for that one. That is until the Lightning chased him out of the game. So Sammy, he gave up the first 6 goals of the game before getting the hook. And then it was Joseph Woll who gave up the 7th one. But no matter. I was cackling like the Wicked Witch about this game. We tried to warn you, Leafs fans. We tried to warn you. Playoff Samsonov, he's something to behold. Really, which is why Caps general manager Brian McClellan was beholden him straight into the trash can following several leaky performances in the postseason. So I can't remember what I put for my bracket for this series. I don't have it right in front of me right at this moment. But I think I picked the Lightning in 6. I know I picked the Lightning for sure. And I think I picked them in 6 games. So Tampa has been really good all season on their own home ice. So taking at least 1 out of the first 2 in Toronto is going to be big for them, I think. So a job well done by them, and you will never, ever, ever in a million billion years catch me picking Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and co. to beat the likes of Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, and those guys in a playoff series. No way. That's like saying, this bunny rabbit has a really good chance against this coyote. It's just not going to happen. So, obviously, though, the injuries to Victor Hedman and Eric Chernak loom large for the Lightning. But it does sound like Hedman's injury, at least, might not be that long term. He could be back in this series. So, we'll have to keep an eye on that. And there was, of course, if you missed it, a dirty Bush League cheap shot by Michael Bunting. That's what took out Eric Chernak. Bunting, he was basically frustrated like a little toddler in a game that you're losing 7-3, and so he decided to throw a blatant elbow straight to Chernak's head when the puck was absolutely nowhere near. So classy stuff, as always, from Michael Bunting, and he was suspended 3 games for his efforts. But I mean, him getting suspended probably actually helps the Leafs, to be honest. All the guy does is take stupid penalties. So getting him out of the lineup, that's probably addition by subtraction for the Leafs, quite honestly. Meanwhile, of course, the Lightning are forced to play without 2 of their top 3 defensemen. So you never like to see that. You never like to see a blatant headshot like that. It was cheap. It was on purpose. It was totally intentional. He went out of his way to do it. So just, Bush League stuff, like I said, from Michael Bunting. Anyways, Samsonov sucks, and checking in on the other recent ex-Caps goalie, things are not going much better for Vitek Vanacek in New Jersey. Again, I hate to say I told you so, Devils fans, but there is a reason why the Caps felt comfortable dropping both of these guys like hotcakes last offseason. So Vanacek, he has now given up a whopping 9 goals against in his first 2 playoff starts as a member of the New Jersey Devils, with an overall save percentage for the series so far of .827. So that is beyond ugly, obviously. And the Devils have, obviously, with a save percentage like that, they've dropped both of those first 2 games. And so they are now in an 0-2 hole against the Rangers, with the series now shifting back to New York City as well. So that's obviously not what the Devils wanted to do, as things certainly aren't going to get any easier for them now that they have to go into Madison Square Garden. You never want to drop the first 2 games, on your own home ice, especially. Unless, of course, you're the 2018 Washington Capitals, in which case, yes, absolutely, do it. Drop the first 2 games on home ice. But something tells me that this Devils team is not the 2018 Washington Capitals. I did pick the Rangers in 5 or in 6, I believe, for my bracket. I'm happy as a clam. Things are going great. All of these talking heads on TV, they like to quack off all season long about how great the Devils' style of play is. So much speed, so fast, blah, 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 blah. I knew that was not going to work in the playoffs. Their style of play is too easy to defend. It's too easy to stop when you're actually game planning for it and, putting in the effort. The thing is that, teams just simply don't do that during the regular season, right? Because you're playing 82 games, you're not going to spend 12 hours in the video room before every regular season game, right? You're just not going to do it. But in playoffs, you certainly will. And the Rangers right now, they know exactly what the Devils are trying to do, and they're just not letting them do it. They're suffocating them, basically. They're not giving them the easy, off the rush, in transition offense that the Devils want. And the Devils, they look lost out there. They don't know what to do. They're not a forecheck team. They're not a cycle team. They're not going to get greasy in front of the net. So if they aren't being given those odd man rushes that they feed off of, then they simply don't score. Their only goal in game 1 came on a penalty shot. Their only goal in game 2 came on a power play. So they are generating absolutely nothing at 5-on-5. And that, like I said, it's only going to get even harder now that, you're going on the road and the Rangers are going to have the last change. So I do not have high hopes for the Devils in this series. And lastly, in the East, we've got the Hurricanes versus Islanders series. And I did save the worst for last. This series has been an absolute snooze fest. It's honestly not even worth talking about. No, seriously, I'm not going to talk about it. You only get to live just this one life, So skipping that one. We're just skipping right over it. And then over in the Western Conference, we have got the number 1 seed Vegas Golden Knights taking on the Winnipeg Jets. We've got the defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche taking on the Seattle Kraken. We've got the Dallas Stars and the Minnesota Wild. And we've got the Edmonton Oilers and the Los Angeles Kings. Now, in all of these Western Conference series, we saw the lower-seeded road team stealing Game 1 in the other team's barn. And then likewise, in all of these series, we then saw the higher-seeded home team come back with a much-needed victory in, what was basically a must-win Game 2 for all of those higher-seeded home teams. So all of these Western Conference series are tied up at 1 game apiece right now. I do find the Vegas-Winnipeg series to be quite an interesting one, because even though Vegas is obviously the higher seeded team, they're the number 1 seed in the whole Western Conference, but I do like the possibility of an upset here, and that was only confirmed even further to me when I watched the way that the Jets played in Game 1 in Vegas's barn. It was a defensive clinic by the Jets. They only let the Golden Knights have 17 shots on net for the whole freaking game. It was a clinic, like I said, and they bullied Vegas in the Knights' own building. So I do like that one for the upset. I have liked it for the upset since, before the series even started. And obviously for me, I always look at the goalie in any series. Who's the goalie? Because that's the one player on a hockey team who can change the course of a series all on their own, right? And so that's also why I like the Jets here. Like the Golden Knights, they've been kind of flip-flopping between different goaltenders all season long. While the Jets, obviously, they have recent Vezina Trophy winner Connor Hellebuck between their pipes. So, that's an easy one for me when you're talking about the goalies. And then we go to the defending champion Avalanche. And I'll tell you, like, they were getting me a little bit worried. They really were. I was a little bit worried about the Avalanche up until, about the halfway point of game number 2. Obviously, you probably saw already the Kraken won game number 1 in Colorado. So they were already up 1-0 in this series. And then the Kraken jumped out to a 2-0 lead in game number 2 as well. And everyone's like, what the hell is going on here? The Avalanche, obviously, like they're heavily, heavily favored in this series. And so just when it looked like the Avs were on their way to dropping the first 2 games on home ice and being down 2-0 in the series, which obviously would have been a disaster scenario for them, and trying to defend their title. But just when it looked like that, all of a sudden the Avs sprung to life. They scored 2 goals in 48 seconds to tie up the game at 2. And then Devin Taves would eventually score the game winner for the Avalanche in the third period, lighting the lamp with about 7 minutes left in regulation. And I do like the Avs to win this series and to go pretty far again in the postseason as a whole, for what it's worth. They've always been, I don't know if you guys know this, but they have always been my second favorite team, back since I was a kid. Patrick Waugh, along with Ole Kolzig, were the reasons why I wanted to be a goalie myself, which worked out pretty well for me. So, I've got to cheer for the Avs whenever my Caps are out. And the Dallas-Minnesota series, like, my goodness, has that ever been a bloodbath? Playoff hockey at its finest. If you aren't watching that series yet, let me just take this opportunity here now to tell you that you should be. You should be. It has been great, great hockey, playoff-style hockey, like I said. Tons of hits, tons of physical play. Tons of, controversy, tons of drama. And you can also, of course, cheer on our good friend and former Caps forward, Marcus Johansson, if you feel so inclined. He is having a good series for Minnesota, and he scored the other night as well. He scored in game 2, but he had like 7 shots on net, I believe, in game number 1 as well. So he's playing great. And for those of you who have been watching that series, or for those of you who have at least seen the highlights, I would love to get your thoughts on the Matt Dumba hit on Joe Pavelski. I'm just curious to hear what other people think, because to me, I don't know, but I kind of thought that the hit was fine, pretty much. It obviously sucks that Pavelski got injured, and he's obviously, he's had head injuries in the past, concussions and things like that. So, you obviously hope that he's okay health-wise, first and foremost. But as far as the hit itself, I don't know, I just think that that's one of those ones where it's the hit itself is fine and the outcome is just bad. I don't know, I didn't really see anything wrong with the hit, to be honest. I thought it was a hard but clean hit. And then Pavelski obviously hit his head on the ice afterwards on the way down. So, it's obviously a really unfortunate outcome, but I think you still can't punish the guy who's making the hit just because the other guy got hurt in the aftermath of it. Those are kind of my feelings on it, because the hit itself was clean, right? The refs thought it was clean. They actually reviewed it while they were out there on the ice. They reviewed it on video because they had called a 5-minute major. So they were able to review it. They were able to go back, look at the video. And then after doing that, they rescinded the major penalty after having watched it back on the video. So they obviously thought it was clean, or pretty much clean. So I don't know, I just really think that that's one of those ones where it's if the guy doesn't hit his head on the ice afterwards and he's completely fine and the play carries on, then, no one probably even thinks twice about it. No one probably even gives it a second thought, right? So I don't think that you can, you have to punish the hit itself, based on the criteria of what is a dirty hit versus a clean hit, right? You have to punish the hit itself. You can't punish the outcome injury-wise. That's what I think anyway. So, it is, like I said, it's just an unfortunate outcome. And obviously, like I said, we're all hoping that Joe Pavelski is going to be okay. That's first and foremost. And anyways, the other thing about this Dallas-Minnesota series so far has been the coaches' decisions on the part of Dean Evason for the Wild regarding their goaltending. And you'll remember Dean Evason here in Washington. Remember, he was an assistant coach here on Bruce Boudreau's staff when Bruce was coaching the Caps. He was also an assistant under Bruce in Minnesota as well, until the Wild eventually fired Bruce and replaced him with Evason as their new head coach, which is where they are at now. But yeah, I mean, like, the Wild's decisions regarding their goaltending in this series, like, Philip Gustafsson, he starts game 1, right, for the Wild. And he plays really well, and they win the game. So, like, they had a 1-0 series lead. They stole game number 1 in Dallas. They have the 1-0 series lead with Gustafsson coming up with the big road win, like I said, in Dallas's building. So, to me, like, you know, game 2, like, it seems obvious to me that Gustafsson would start again. But no, like, old galaxy brain there, Dean Evason, he decides he's going to go with Marc-Andre Fleury. And, like, I get it. I get that they essentially platoon these guys all season long. I get that. I do. But it's the playoffs now. It's not the regular season anymore. And every game in the playoffs really, really matters. And the difference between a 2-0 series lead versus being tied 1-1 is astronomical, right? Astronomical. So Evason, he puts Fleury in for game 2. And Fleury, like, he gets lit the fuck up, man. Like, he played horribly. He couldn't have stopped a beach ball that night, honestly. And the Wild get run out of the building, and now, like I said, the series is tied 1-1. So, like, to me, like, that's just fucking stupid, right? Like, that is overcoaching if I have ever seen it. Like, that's a guy in Evason who clearly thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. And so, like I said, you know, he's trying to galaxy brain it when he could have just left well enough alone and probably been up 2-0 in the series, right? Like, I guarantee you that the Dallas players were so happy when they saw that Fleury was going to be starting game 2, not because Fleury is bad, but because Gustafsson was clearly feeling himself. He was clearly feeling himself out there. Like, he was playing really well. So if you can get the hot guy out of the net for no apparent reason at all, you're ecstatic. You're ecstatic as the opposition in that scenario. So I just don't understand what Dean Evason is doing there at all. Like I said, just trying to galaxy brain shit out there. But hey, you know, maybe there's a reason why the Minnesota Wild have not won a playoff series in so long. And maybe it's partly, at least, because of shit like this. Like, this was just, I don't know. I don't get it. But hey, I'm not the coach. And Evason, by the way, he did try to dodge the stupidity of his decision after this game. Like, he tried to blame it on wanting to give Philip Gustafsson rest. And, like, I'm sorry, what? Rest? The kid is 24 years old. He's 24 years old. And as if that's not enough, it's only game 2 of the playoffs. The kid has played one game. One game. I guarantee you, at 24 years old, he could play 10 days in a row and not even feel it. Like, it's a stupid excuse from Evason. So, I don't know. Like, I don't know if they felt like they owed Marc-Andre Fleury something. You know, owed him a start, maybe. But, like, I mean, Jesus, man. Like, at some point, finally winning a playoff series is going to have to come first, isn't it? And why would you owe Fleury anything anyways, by the way? Like, he's been on your team for, like, 10 minutes, man. Or at least that's what it feels like. Like, it's not as if he's a franchise legend for you, like a lifelong Minnesota Wild player. Like, come on, man. Like, your fans deserve to see a series win. I'm getting upset right now on behalf of Minnesota Wild fans because those fans, they show up all the time. They deserve to see their team win a playoff series. They've showed up for long enough. Anyways. Lastly, we have got the Edmonton Oilers and the Los Angeles Kings. That one has been pretty tame so far, but the Kings, they did come out with a big road W in game number 1, and so they have stolen home ice advantage away from the Oilers, and so that series is tied up at 1 game apiece, heading back to Los Angeles now. for the next 2 games. And, like probably the 2 biggest storylines of that series so far are that Connor McDavid has been held pointless except for 1 single assist on a power play. And he's also a -2, by the way. So, that's not great. And then the other big storyline is the Oilers' inability to hold a lead. As they have now blown a multi-goal lead in each of the first 2 games. It cost them the game in game 1, as the Kings won the game in overtime after rallying from 2 separate 2-goal deficits, ultimately tying the game with just 16 seconds remaining in regulation. And then, like I said, Iafallo won it for the Kings in overtime. And while blowing a multi-goal lead again, 48 hours later, it didn't end up biting the Oilers in game 2, as they were able to score another goal of their own in regulation on a shot that Joonas Korpisalo probably should have stopped. But, even though it didn't end up biting the Oilers that time around, their propensity for blowing leads has to be concerning if you're an Oilers fan, which I'm not, so I couldn't care less. Like, keep blowing the leads. It's fun for the rest of us. But anyways, this is another series that I would definitely label as having upset potential, especially if Connor McDavid continues to look as if he'd rather be anywhere else. So that's it, folks. That's all we've got for you today. We will, of course, be back again next week to chat with you all again. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. Tell all your family, tell all your friends, tell all of your fellow Caps fans and fellow hockey fans in general that this is the place to be. We are going to have content for you, like I said, all summer long, so stick with us. And until next time, babes, I wanted to thank you all again so much for being here with us today. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate all of you more than you will ever know, more than I could ever put into words. So thank you, babes. Enjoy the playoff hockey tonight and every night until we chat again. And as always, let's go Caps.